When you grow up believing you're unworthy of love, every small act of kindness feels like a miracle. For Elara Quinn, that miracle came too late. She was only 4 years old when her parents left her on her grandfather's porch with a single note. "We can't do this anymore. Please take care of her." Her earliest memory wasn't of laughter or bedtime stories. It was of that folded piece of paper clutched in her small hand, as her grandfather, Arthur Quinn, stood frozen at the door, disbelief clouding his eyes. "Elara?" he whispered, kneeling down to her level. His weathered hands trembled as he took the note from her tiny fingers. She remembers how his face changed as he read it, how the confusion melted into something harder, colder. Then he looked at her, this small child with a backpack and nowhere to go, and his expression softened. "Come inside, little one," he said, his voice rough but gentle. "It's getting cold out here." That was the moment that defined her life, not the abandonment, but what came after. The choice her grandfather made in that split second to take in a child he never planned for. Arthur was a widower in his late 60s, rough around the edges, but with a heart that beat fiercely for the people he loved. And from that day forward, that love went entirely to Elara. He wasn't prepared to raise a child. His small house in Springwood, Texas, had been a bachelor's home for years since his wife passed. But that night he cleared out his spare room, put fresh sheets on the bed, and told Elara she could stay for as long as you want, kid. She didn't understand then that as long as you want meant forever, that her parents weren't coming back, that this gruff old man with calloused hands would be the only real parent she'd ever know. Before I even tell you what happened next, let me ask you this. Have you ever been betrayed by someone you trusted most? If you have, you'll feel this story deep in your soul. And if you know that kind of pain, hit subscribe. Not because it helps me, but because stories like this remind us that sometimes silence and strength are the best revenge. Arthur raised Elara in a quiet corner of Springwood, where the air smelled of pine and distant rain. He wasn't rich by any means, but he worked hard, restoring antique furniture, managing a small carpentry shop, and saving what he could. Their life together fell into a simple rhythm. Weekday mornings, Arthur would walk Elara to the bus stop, his hand engulfing her tiny one. Afternoons, she'd sit in the corner of his workshop, doing homework while he worked, the sound of his tools a comforting backdrop to her childhood. He taught her how to read by tracing words on old newspapers. When she turned 10, he handed her her first toolbox and said, "Don't ever wait for someone to build your world, kid. Learn to do it yourself." But despite his warmth, there was always a silence in their home, the kind that hangs heavy when too much has been left unsaid. Arthur never talked about Elara's parents, and Elara never asked. On school forms where it asked for mother's name and father's name, she'd write Arthur Quinn under both and hand it in without explanation. When Mother's Day came around, she'd make cards for her teacher instead. On Father's Day, she'd spend extra time helping Arthur in his workshop. The other kids noticed, of course. Children always do. "Where's your mom?" they'd ask on the playground. "Don't have one," she'd reply, kicking at the dirt. "Everyone has a mom," they'd insist. "Not me." Deep down, she believed that if she just became someone worthy, someone successful, kind, perfect, maybe one day they'd come back. Maybe they'd regret leaving her. Maybe they'd want her again. So she studied harder than anyone, won spelling bees, got perfect attendance, joined every club that would have her. Arthur watched her drive herself, understanding more than she knew. At night, when she thought he couldn't hear, he'd listen to her cry quietly into her pillow. and each time he'd silently vow to be enough for her, even if he was all she had. The letter arrived on a Tuesday, 12 years after they left her on that porch. Elara was 16 now, with straight A's and a quiet determination that made Arthur proud. She recognized her mother's handwriting immediately, though she couldn't explain how. Maybe some things just stay with you, even when you're too young to remember. "There's something for you," Arthur said, his voice tight as he handed her the envelope. His eyes watched her carefully, like he was bracing for an explosion. Elara's hands trembled as she opened it. The paper inside smelled like perfume, expensive and unfamiliar. "Dear Elara," it began. "No, we miss you. No, we're sorry." Just her name, like they were casual acquaintances. "We hope this letter finds you well. We've been thinking about you lately and wanted to check in. Your father got a promotion last year and we moved to California. The weather is beautiful here. Maybe someday we could reconnect. Take care, Mom and Dad. Take care," like they'd ever taken care of her. Elara read it 3 times, searching for something, anything, that resembled remorse or explanation. There was nothing. She looked up to find Arthur watching her, his jaw clenched tight. "They didn't even say they're sorry," she whispered. Arthur took the letter from her hands, walked to the fireplace, and tossed it in. The flames caught the edge, curling the paper into ash. "Some people," he muttered, "don't deserve a second chance." That night, Elara cried quietly into her pillow, not because of what was lost, but because of what she'd never had. Parents who fought to keep her, parents who missed her, parents who would have burned the world down before giving her away. She wondered if they ever thought about her birthday, or if they celebrated having one less mouth to feed. She wondered if they had other children now, ones they decided were worth keeping. By morning, she'd made a decision. She would stop waiting for people who never planned to return. She would build a life so good they'd regret walking away. By 18, Elara had earned a full scholarship to study law at the University of Texas. She was brilliant, meticulous, stubborn, and fueled by a quiet fire that burned brighter with every achievement. The day her acceptance letter arrived, Arthur lifted her off the ground in a bear hug, his eyes shining with tears. "Your grandmother would have been so proud," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "She always said you had a fighter's spirit." Elara thrived in college. While other students partied, she studied. While they slept, she outlined cases. Her professors noticed her intensity, her refusal to back down from a challenge. "You argue like someone who's been fighting her whole life," her constitutional law professor told her. She didn't tell him he was right. Junior year, everything changed. Arthur's hands started trembling, not from emotion, but something worse. His once steady voice softened. His strong frame thinned. Pancreatic cancer, stage 4. For months, Elara balanced classes, part-time work, and endless hospital visits. She'd bring her textbooks to his room, reading aloud as he drifted in and out of sleep. She'd quiz herself on legal terms while the machines beeped around them. She never complained. Not once. But one night, as she sat beside him, Arthur whispered something that would stick with her forever. "Don't ever let them tell you that blood means loyalty." It doesn't. Character does. He passed away 2 weeks later, just after her 24th birthday. The funeral was small, just Elara and a few of Arthur's old friends. No relatives came, there weren't any left. Standing at his grave, Elara made him a promise. "I'll make you proud. I'll be the person you raised me to be." You know what hurts the most? Not what they did, but that I still tried to make them proud after everything. If you've ever given people too many chances, You already understand this pain. Don't just scroll, subscribe. Join people who've been through it too, because you deserve stories that make you feel seen. A month after the funeral, Elara received a call from Mr. Donnelly, Arthur's longtime lawyer. "I need to see you in my office," he said, his voice gentle but formal. "It's about your grandfather's will." Elara expected nothing. Arthur had lived modestly. His house was paid off but small. His carpentry shop barely broke even most years. She assumed she'd inherit these simple things, the physical remnants of their life together. She was wrong. "Elara," Mr. Donnelly said gently, sliding a document across his desk. "Your grandfather left you everything, his home, his shop, and a trust fund worth $2.7 million. The room seemed to tilt. "That's impossible," she whispered. "He didn't have that kind of money." Mr. Donnelly smiled sadly. "Arthur was a private man. He invested in land deals decades ago, properties that skyrocketed in value. He never touched the money, said he was saving it for something important. That something was her. The will included a letter, written in Arthur's shaky handwriting. "Elara, I couldn't give you parents who stayed, but I can give you a future without limits. Don't spend this money chasing ghosts. Build something that matters. And remember, you were always enough even when they couldn't see it. Love, Grandpa." She sat in his workshop that night, surrounded by the scent of sawdust and memory, whispering to the shadows, "You really did build me a world, didn't you?" In the months that followed, Elara finished law school at the top of her class. She bought a small apartment near the courthouse and started working as an assistant district attorney. Her colleagues respected her sharp mind and unwavering focus. None of them knew about the money. She kept it private, just as Arthur had. It wasn't about wealth to her, it was about security, the kind she'd never had as a child. But money has a way of drawing attention, especially from those who believe they deserve a share. News travels fast, especially the kind carried by greed. 3 weeks after the will was executed, Elara received an unexpected visitor. The doorbell rang on a Sunday morning as she sat reviewing case files. Through the peephole, she saw a woman in her late 40s, blonde hair carefully styled, designer sunglasses perched on her head. Something about her face made Elara's stomach tighten. She opened the door slowly. "Elara," the woman said, her voice trembling between guilt and rehearsed affection. "You've grown so beautiful." It took a moment for recognition to hit. The woman standing on her porch was her mother, Denise. The last time Elara had seen her, she'd been 4 years old. "We're your family," Denise continued, tears welling in her eyes. "Can we come in?" Behind her stood a man, her father, Martin, and a teenage girl who looked about 16. The girl had Elara's green eyes and high cheekbones, a half-sister she never knew existed. "This is Riley," Denise said, noticing Elara's stare. "Your sister." Sister. The word felt hollow. Elara stepped back, allowing them into the apartment she'd kept immaculate, just as Arthur had taught her. They looked around, taking in the law books, the framed diploma, the simple but expensive furniture. "You've done well for yourself," Martin said, his tone suggesting surprise. "Arthur raised me well," Elara replied, her voice steady despite the earthquake happening inside her. They sat awkwardly in her living room. Denise kept touching things, the coffee table, the throw pillows, Elara's hand, as if trying to establish connection through physical contact. "We've missed you," she said. "We think about you all the time." 20 years of silence suggested otherwise. Riley sat quietly, looking uncomfortable and out of place. Elara felt a flicker of sympathy for the girl. This wasn't her fault. "How did you find me?" Elara asked, though she already knew. Martin cleared his throat. We heard about Arthur's passing. We wanted to pay our respects. The lie hung in the air between them. They hadn't come for Arthur. They hadn't even attended his funeral. They'd come because somehow they'd learned about the money. The air in the apartment thickened. Arthur's house, her house now, felt suddenly too small for the ghosts that had returned. Over tea that tasted like discomfort, Denise spoke first. We were young, Elara. We made mistakes. But your grandpa should have let us be part of your life. Elara's cup froze halfway to her lips. Part of her life? They'd left her like an unwanted package. Arthur never prevented you from contacting me, she said quietly. You chose not to. Martin shifted in his seat. It was complicated. We had financial troubles, then we moved around a lot. By the time we got settled, we thought maybe it was too late. Too late, as if there's an expiration date on being a parent. Riley stared at her shoes, clearly wishing she were anywhere else. Elara noticed the girl's fingernails were bitten to the quick, a nervous habit Elara herself had outgrown years ago. We want to make things right, Denise continued, reaching for Elara's hand. We're family. We should be in each other's lives. Family. The word felt hollow coming from the woman who'd abandoned her. Martin added, We just want to make amends. Family should stick together, especially now that... He paused, glancing meaningfully at the framed photo of Arthur on the mantel. Elara caught it instantly. They know. She stood slowly. You're not here because of me, she said evenly. You're here because of him, because of what he left. Her mother's eyes flashed. That's not true, but the tension said otherwise. I think you should leave, Elara said, her voice calm despite the storm inside her. Elara, please, Denise began. Now. They left reluctantly, Denise pressing her phone number into Elara's hand. Call us when you've had time to think. As the door closed behind them, Elara leaned against it, her heart pounding. 20 years of absence. And they thought they could walk back into her life because there was something in it for them. Arthur had been right. Some people don't deserve a second chance. Weeks passed. Elara threw herself into her work, prosecuting cases with the precision and focus that had earned her respect in the DA's office. She tried to forget the visit, to push away the memory of Riley's familiar green eyes. Then came the letter, thick, embossed, official. Her parents were suing her. The lawsuit claimed that Arthur Quinn was mentally unfit when he signed the will, that Elara had manipulated him, and that as his legal heirs, Denise and Martin deserved equal distribution of assets. The very people who abandoned her at 4 were now demanding millions from the man who raised her when they wouldn't. It was grotesque. Elara read the complaint 3 times, her prosecutor's mind cataloging each false claim, each twisted narrative. They portrayed Arthur as confused and easily influenced. They described themselves as loving parents separated from their child by circumstance. They painted Elara as calculating and manipulative. The rage that filled her wasn't hot. It was ice cold and clarifying. This wasn't just about money. This was about erasing the truth of what they'd done, rewriting history to make themselves the victims. She called Janet Morales, the best estate litigation attorney in the county. They have no case, Janet assured her after reviewing the documents. But they're hoping you'll settle to avoid the publicity. I won't, Elara said firmly, not a penny. It'll get ugly, Janet warned. Family lawsuits always do. Family. There was that word again. They're not my family, Elara replied. They're just people who share my DNA. The next day at work, Her boss called her into his office. "I heard about the lawsuit," he said, concern etching his features. "Do you need time off?" Elara shook her head. "No, I need to work." "Elara," he said gently, "this is going to be in the papers. Assistant DA sued by estranged parents. Are you prepared for that?" She hadn't considered the publicity. The thought of her colleagues, the judges she appeared before, everyone knowing her personal business made her stomach turn. But then she thought of Arthur, of his quiet dignity, his unwavering principles. "I'm not ashamed of my story," she said finally. "Let them print what they want." When I finally stood my ground, they called me heartless. But tell me, where were they when I was breaking? If you've ever had to choose peace over people, this channel is your space. Subscribe not for me, but for every quiet soul who took their power back. The weekend after receiving the lawsuit, Elara returned to Arthur's house, her house now, to search for anything that might help her case. She needed proof of his mental clarity, evidence that would show the court who Arthur Quinn really was. In his study, she found a locked drawer she'd never noticed before. The key was hidden in a hollowed-out book on his shelf. To Kill a Mockingbird, his favorite. Inside the drawer lay a leather journal, its pages filled with Arthur's neat handwriting. The entries started the day Elara arrived on his doorstep and continued until 3 days before his death. "Elara passed the bar exam today," read one entry from 2 years ago. "I'm setting up the trust fund tomorrow. I know her parents will come looking once I'm gone. They always wanted the easy way out." Her breath caught. Arthur had known, he'd anticipated this betrayal. Deeper in the drawer, she found a USB drive labeled "For Elara, if they come." That night, she plugged it into her laptop. The screen filled with Arthur's face, older, thinner from the cancer, but his eyes sharp and clear. "Elara," he began, "if you're watching this, it means they've come for what they think is theirs. I'm recording this with my lawyer present to establish my mental competence." The camera panned to show Mr. Donnelly sitting beside him, nodding. "I am of sound mind and body," Arthur continued, "and I am leaving everything to my granddaughter, Elara Quinn, who has been my only family for 20 years. His eyes hardened. "Denise and Martin abandoned their child on my doorstep. They never sent a birthday card, never called it Christmas, never contributed a dime to her upbringing. The only time they contacted me was 5 years ago, asking for money. When I refused, they blocked my number." Elara gasped. She hadn't known about this. The video continued for another hour, Arthur methodically documenting dates, events, and conversations. He'd kept records of everything. In his final moments on camera, he looked directly into the lens. "Elara, don't let them rewrite our story. You were never unwanted. Not by me." She wiped tears from her cheeks, a new resolve hardening within her. Arthur hadn't just left her money, he'd left her armor. The courtroom was packed. Reporters whispered in the back row, curious about the ADA suing her own parents' case. Local lawyers filled the gallery, drawn by professional interest or simple gossip. When Elara walked in, the murmurs grew. She wore a simple navy suit, nothing flashy, nothing that screamed money. Her mother, by contrast, had dressed for attention in a designer outfit that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. Denise rolled her eyes when she saw Elara, as if this were nothing but another family argument. Martin sat stiffly beside her, his jaw tight. Riley wasn't there. Elara felt a pang of relief. The girl shouldn't have to witness this. Elara placed her documents neatly on the table, every paper a weapon sharpened by truth. Janet Morales, her attorney, arranged their exhibits with practiced efficiency. "You sure you don't want me to handle the testimony?" Janet whispered. Elara shook her head. "I've spent my life waiting for them to tell me why they left. Maybe today I'll finally get the answer." Judge Henderson entered, a seasoned jurist known for his no-nonsense approach. He glanced at the case file, then at the parties before him. "Unusual case," he noted dryly. "Let's proceed." The parents' attorney, Maxwell Reed, went first. He painted Arthur as increasingly confused in his final years, a lonely old man manipulated by his only companion. "Arthur Quinn was not in his right mind when he signed this will," Reed argued. "He was isolated from his family, his daughter and son-in-law, by the defendant." Elara's knuckles whitened as she gripped the edge of the table. The audacity of their lies made her physically ill. When it was Janet's turn, she approached the bench calmly. "Your Honor, before we begin our defense, we'd like to establish Ms. Quinn's credentials for the record." The judge nodded. "Elara Quinn graduated summa cum laude from UT Law. She passed the bar in the top percentile. She currently serves as an assistant district attorney for this very county." Reed's head snapped up. He turned to Denise and Martin, who suddenly looked uncomfortable. "Wait, you're the ADA?" Reed asked, his dismissive tone faltering. Judge Henderson raised an eyebrow. "Counsel, are you saying you filed this case without knowing who you were suing?" The courtroom rippled with quiet laughter. Reed cleared his throat. "Of course not, Your Honor. I simply wasn't aware of the specific nature of her position." Denise turned sharply to her lawyer, whispering something that didn't reach the microphone. The judge continued, half smiling. "Well, this should be interesting." The courtroom burst into quiet murmurs again, this time with respect. The courtroom fell silent as Janet set up a projector. Elara's heart pounded. This was the moment Arthur had prepared her for. "Your Honor, we'd like to present video evidence," Janet announced. The screen flickered to life, showing Arthur in his hospital bed, thin but alert. The timestamp showed it was 3 weeks before his death. "My name is Arthur Quinn," he began, his voice frail but clear. "I am recording this statement of my own free will, with my doctor and lawyer present to confirm my mental competence." The camera panned to show both professionals nodding. "I am leaving my entire estate to my granddaughter, Elara Quinn. This decision is made with full awareness and clear intention." Arthur's eyes hardened. "My daughter Denise and her husband Martin abandoned Elara on my doorstep when she was 4 years old. They left a note saying they couldn't do this anymore. For 20 years, they made no attempt to be part of her life." Denise shifted uncomfortably in her seat. "The only contact I received from them," Arthur continued, "was in 2018 when they called asking for money. When I refused, they blocked my number." Janet paused the video. "Your Honor, we have phone records confirming this call, as well as the subsequent blocking of Mr. Quinn's number." She handed the documents to the judge, then resumed the video. "I raised Elara alone. I watched her graduate high school, college, and law school without her parents present. I am of sound mind, and this is my final wish, that everything I worked for goes to the only person who was truly family to me." The video ended. The courtroom remained silent. Next, Janet presented bank records, showing that Denise and Martin had tried to contact Arthur 2 years before his death, not to reconcile, but to borrow $50,000. When he refused, they'd blocked his number. "Your Honor," Janet said, "we also have evidence that Ms. Quinn's parents have contested 3 other wills from family members in the past decade." This was news to Elara. She glanced at her parents, who avoided her gaze. When Martin took the stand, Janet's cross-examination was surgical. "Mr. Quinn, You claim your father was mentally unfit when he made his will, yet you asked him for $50,000 2 years ago. Did you believe he was mentally competent then? Martin's face reddened. That was different. Different how? Was he competent when you wanted his money, but incompetent when he gave it to someone else? The courtroom stirred. Martin lost his temper. She brainwashed him, he shouted, pointing at Elara. We were supposed to inherit what's rightfully ours. The mask had slipped. The entire facade of remorse shattered. Judge Henderson leaned forward. Mr. Quinn, he said slowly, are you implying that your father was of sound mind when you wanted his money, but unsound when he gave it to someone else? The courtroom laughed softly. Martin's face flushed crimson. The entire charade was crumbling, and everyone could see it. Day 3 of the trial brought Denise to the witness stand. She'd composed herself overnight. Arriving in a more subdued outfit, her expression carefully crafted to show maternal grief. I never stopped loving Elara, she testified, dabbing at dry eyes with a tissue. We were young and struggling. We thought Arthur could give her a better life temporarily. We always planned to come back for her. Elara's stomach turned at the performance. Mrs. Quinn, Janet began her cross-examination. If you always planned to return for your daughter, why did your note say, and I quote, we can't do this anymore? Denise hesitated. We meant the financial struggle. Then why not write, we'll be back when things improve? No answer. Mrs. Quinn, in 20 years, how many birthday cards did you send Elara? I don't remember. The answer is 0. How many Christmases did you visit? We couldn't afford. The answer is 0. How many school events did you attend? Silence. Mrs. Quinn, your daughter graduated top of her class from law school. Did you attend her graduation? We weren't invited, Denise snapped. Janet walked to their exhibit table and returned with a stack of envelopes. These were returned to Mr. Quinn, unopened. They contain graduation announcements for high school, college, and law school, all sent to your last known address. The judge examined the envelopes, postmarked years apart, all marked return to sender. Mrs. Quinn, Janet continued, you testified that you always loved your daughter. Yet when she achieved one of life's major milestones, you returned her invitation without opening it. How do you explain that? Denise's carefully constructed facade began to crack. We had our reasons. Yes, Janet said quietly. I believe you did. During the lunch recess, Elara sat alone in a conference room, exhausted. The emotional toll was heavier than she'd anticipated. Seeing her parents lie so effortlessly about loving her, it reopened wounds she thought had healed. Janet joined her, closing the door. The judge is seeing through them, she assured Elara. But there's something else you should know. She slid a document across the table. It was a property listing, Elara's childhood home, the one Arthur had kept all these years. It had been put on the market 3 days after the lawsuit was filed. They're already spending the money they think they'll get from you, Janet said gently. Elara stared at the listing, the final betrayal, selling the only home she'd ever known before they even won the case. Let's finish this, she said quietly. After weeks of testimonies, emotional breakdowns, and family secrets exposed like open wounds, the courtroom was packed for the judge's decision. Reporters leaned forward in their seats. Law students squeezed into the back row, drawn by the drama of the case. Elara sat straight-backed at the defense table, her face a careful mask. Across the aisle, her parents whispered to each other, already planning how to spend their windfall. Judge Henderson entered, his expression giving nothing away. I've reviewed all evidence in this matter thoroughly, he began. This case, at its core, is about whether Arthur Quinn was of sound mind when he made his will, and whether undue influence was exerted upon him. He shuffled his papers, then looked directly at Denise and Martin. The plaintiffs have presented no credible evidence that Arthur Quinn was mentally impaired. In fact, their own actions, specifically requesting financial assistance from him 2 years prior, suggest they themselves believed him to be mentally competent. Denise's face tightened. Furthermore, the video testimony recorded by Mr. Quinn clearly demonstrates his awareness and intention. The phone records, returned mail, and complete absence of any parental involvement for 20 years strongly contradict the plaintiff's claim of a loving relationship interrupted by circumstance. The judge paused, removing his glasses. The court finds no evidence of coercion, manipulation, or mental incapacity. The will stands as written. All assets remain in the sole possession of Ms. Elara Quinn. Elara exhaled, not in triumph, but in quiet relief. It was over. Her parents looked stunned, her mother's face contorted with rage. Additionally, the judge continued, the court finds this lawsuit to be frivolous and brought in bad faith. The plaintiffs will pay all court costs and the defendants' legal fees. As people began to file out, Denise approached Elara, her voice low and venomous. You'll regret this someday. When you have children, you'll understand what it means to make mistakes. Elara stood gathering her papers. I already did, she said softly, for 22 years. She walked out of the courtroom without looking back, into the bright afternoon sunlight. For the first time since Arthur's death, she felt like she could breathe again. The lawsuit made local headlines for months. Commentators called it the family versus the truth case. Legal blogs analyzed it as a textbook example of estate litigation gone wrong. Elara refused interviews. She didn't want fame, she wanted peace. 6 months after the trial, she made a decision. She sold Arthur's land, acres of Texas countryside that developers had coveted for years. The sale doubled the value of her inheritance, but money had never been what mattered to her. She established the Arthur Quinn Foundation for Children in Kinship Care, a nonprofit providing legal aid to grandparents raising their grandchildren. She funded scholarships for law students who'd been raised by extended family. At work, she requested assignment to family court cases, using her expertise to protect children caught in the crossfire of adult failures. You could make more money in private practice, her boss remarked once. Elara shook her head. I'm exactly where I need to be. She kept Arthur's house, though she didn't live there. Instead, she renovated it into a community center where grandparents raising grandchildren could find resources, support groups, and free legal advice. On the wall hung a simple plaque. Family is built by presence, not by blood. Every year on Arthur's birthday, she visited his gravesite with a single white rose and whispered, I kept my promise. The money that her parents had fought so desperately to claim now funded programs helping children just like she had been, abandoned, confused, but not unloved. Sometimes, walking through the community center, watching grandparents learn about their legal rights, or children finding friends who understood their unique family situations, Elara would think about Riley, the half-sister she barely knew. She wondered if the girl understood what had happened, if she'd been fed the same lies Denise and Martin had told the court. She wondered if Riley had her own Arthur, someone who showed up when it mattered. Elara hoped she did. Everyone deserved at least one person who chose to stay. A year after the trial ended, Elara received a small envelope from a law firm she didn't recognize. Her first thought was another lawsuit, perhaps her parents trying a different angle to claim what was never theirs. But inside was a handwritten letter on plain notebook paper, the handwriting careful and young. "Dear Elara," it began, "you don't know me, not really. We met once, but it wasn't a real meeting. I'm your sister Riley." Elara sank into her chair, heart racing. "I'm writing without Mom and Dad knowing. I turned 18 last month and I'm leaving for college soon. I wanted to tell you I'm sorry for what they did, both when you were little and at the trial. I was in the back of the courtroom that last day. They didn't know I came." The letter continued, Riley's words honest and raw. "I don't blame you," it read. "Mom and Dad made their choices. But I saw how you stood up for yourself, for what's right. I want to be better than them. I hope we can meet one day if you're willing. I understand if you're not." She'd included her email address and phone number. Elara folded the letter carefully, a soft smile touching her lips. For the first time, she realized that not all broken things stay broken. Some cracks let light through. She picked up her phone and typed a simple message. "Coffee next Saturday? I'd like to know my sister." In a world obsessed with bloodlines, Elara learned that family isn't defined by DNA. It's defined by devotion. Arthur gave her love when no one else would. And in the end, love, not inheritance, not revenge, not power, was the legacy that truly mattered. Sometimes revenge isn't about payback. It's about peace. And if this story touched you, subscribe right now. Because somewhere out there, another person is watching in silence, needing a reminder that they're not alone, and your one click might help them find it.